It's officially day number 2 of the 24/7 Dual Force beta. So I either just finished streaming or I've just started streaming again. If I'm live, you'll see a link in the description to my Twitch channel. Come say hi as we play more DC Dual Force. Starting tomorrow, I'll have gameplay videos going up of all of the Dual Force stuff I've been doing over the 24/7 beta. But for now, I want to talk to you about General Zod. General Zod is our only quote-unquote revealed leader that is also unreleased. He isn't even really technically revealed. If you go into the in-game client and you go to the golden membership tab and you zoom all the way in, you can see General Zod. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, you can't exactly read that text. You can if you've actually got the game in front of you. So some of my wording might be a little inaccurate, but this is the general text of General Zod. I have no way of enhancing this image or giving you a better look at this card in any way. The only way you can clearly read this card is by launching up the game yourself, going to this golden membership tab, which is currently not possible because the servers aren't live, and then getting a really close look at your monitor. In my case, I have a 1440p monitor, so it actually comes through quite clear. I mean, I still have to squint my eyes and get my eyes really close to the screen, but you can read it if you're able to get to that point in the game, which of course right now you won't be able to. Leaders are such an important part of deck building that really each individual leader could warrant its own video if you really wanted to give them a deep dive. In the case of a new leader coming out, I think it's absolutely worth its own video. Bit of a disclaimer, this is an unreleased card on a graphic that was only available during the streamer beta, so it's possible that the design for General Zod has changed over time and that we won't get this version of the card released. But assuming for a second that this card will be released in its current state, let's talk about General Zod. First things first, General Zod is a Tyranny leader with 22 defense, already off to a fantastic start so far. I would say on average, Tyranny has the lowest quality leaders despite having some of the coolest designs. So if they ever add a Tyranny leader that is really flexible and that can kind of just slot into a lot of different strategies, that leader will probably become the de facto default Tyranny leader. Is General Zod going to be that? Well, let's continue. His ability is a 4-cost ability with the text General Zod gains +7 attack and invincible this turn. Exhaust each enemy character in the same lane as General Zod and give them can't protect this turn. Alright, let's zoom out for a second. He's kind of like a more aggressive version of Superman. My first impressions of the card were not amazing. I was not initially impressed, but after giving it some thought, I'm actually really looking forward to playing with General Zod. General Zod is potentially a fantastic method of pushing for lethal. Imagine running something like General Zod and Doomsday together. They both come online on turn 4, or at least your 4th charge, so sometimes it'll be turn 4, sometimes it'll be turn 5, but whichever turn that ends up being, that's 17 damage that does not care about blockers. While 17 damage won't quite kill most leaders in the game, it does kill both Batgirl and the Flash. Regardless, 17 damage is a huge amount of damage, especially because you don't have to draw into this. It's not like a 2-card combo or a 3-card combo. No matter what you do throughout the game, unless the opponent Hugo Stranges you or something like that, on your 4th turn where you're gaining charge, again, sometimes that will be turn 4, sometimes that will be turn 5, you'll be able to disable whatever blockers the opponent has in front of them and hit them for 17 damage. Assuming that does kill the enemy leader, or at least it gets it close enough that we can kill them the following turn, Doomsday's charge is going to start ramping up a lot faster, and then we'll be able to hit again for another 10 damage. You could definitely see some potential there. Focusing on his design for a moment, I'll say the one sad thing about General Zod compared to something like Superman is extraordinarily flexible. You could run Superman in kind of an aggressive strategy. You could also run Superman in kind of a mid-range strategy as removal. You could also totally run him in an aggressive strategy. But contextually, Zod is going to be boxed into more of an aggressive playstyle, mainly because at the deck building screen, you'll never add General Zod to your list as a way to remove cards from the enemy's board, because if you were going to do that, why wouldn't you just add Lex Luthor instead, which is sometimes a draw 2 card? You could argue that Zod is more quote-unquote flexible in that Lex can never use his ability to push for lethal in the same way that Zod can, so perhaps you could say that Zod would fill a more mid-range role where Lex will only fill that kind of control role. But I think for the most part, General Zod is going to end up being our aggressive option in Tyranny, while Lex Luthor will be our mid-range control option, which honestly, Tyranny really wanted an aggressive option. If you look at the other leaders in the Tyranny faction, none of them really plug and play into an aggressive strategy. When I've been running aggressive strategies that happen to be in the Tyranny faction, I've been running Lex Luthor, which works because it's a way to remove a blocker from the enemy side of the board, but it's definitely slower than I would like it to be, and at the end of the day, it's not damage in the same way that Zod is damage. Don't get me wrong, even as you pilot a General Zod deck, there's going to be situations where you want to use Zod as removal, but that's a decision you'll be able to make during the match and not at the deck building screen. So as far as like constructed deck building is concerned, and again, it's very early days, no one's played a single game of General Zod yet, but I think General Zod will be reserved for, again, those aggressive strategies, while Lex Luthor will fall into that mid-range control-y area. Do we think Zod is actually going to be a good leader? I think so. Earlier on, I talked about how we needed needed like a de facto leader that we could just kind of plug into anything. And while General Zod is probably less so that than what Lex Luthor is, he definitely fills a void in the Tyranny faction. And I think depending on the type of deck you're building, if Tyranny is like more or less your support faction and your main goal is building around whatever your other leader is doing, Zod could make perfect sense depending on what that deck list looks like. But really right now it's kind of hard to miss with a Tyranny leader. Poison Ivy is a very specific type of character, a very specific type of leader that wants a very specific builds surrounding her, whether that be some type of buff deck or some type of draw a million cards deck. Black Adam is obviously quite specialized, like you want to build like a very specific type of deck list for Black Adam. So that leaves the Lex Luthor as our quote-unquote default Tyranny leader. And now, depending on what your 40 card deck list looks like, you'll have the option to choose between General Zod or Lex Luthor, which is a meaningful difference. And there's certainly going to be decks that really appreciate having access to Zod over having access to Lex Luthor. General Zod also has 3 additional health over Lex Luthor, so if that's something you're concerned about, maybe that's something you need to consider. I'm really hesitant to give like super hot takes on unreleased cards. If you haven't seen my set review videos yet, I was very general with a lot of the things I talked about because we hadn't got our hands on the game yet, so I didn't give anything like star ratings or anything like that, and I think that's something I'm probably going to generally avoid. Like, I don't want to rate cards before they release. I think in general it's kind of silly, but talking about them, that's no problem at all. But I'm quite hopeful that General Zod will fill a very important role in the Tyranny faction, and he might even end up being one of the stronger Tyranny options. I'll tell you this, if I was building a Tyranny list right now and I didn't know which leader to run and my deck didn't really need a Poison Ivy, it's not really built around a Black Adam, and I had to choose between Lex and Zod, I'm still probably going Lex. With that said, there's a lot of interesting build ideas for General Zod. Like I said, there's that General Zod Doomsday idea where we could potentially run stuff like Bazooka and try to go like all burn, just nothing but face damage. That's something that wasn't possible with Lex Luthor, or at least probably wasn't worth considering for Lex Luthor. With General Zod, that's a lot more appealing. All right, I think I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think of General Zod as a leader in the Tyranny faction. Keep being awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.